I'm Amanda Rojo and I'm going to talk about the chapter 4, which is ecosystems and communities. So what is climate? First of all, weather and climate both involve variations in temperature. Weather is the day-to-day conditions of Earth's atmospheres, and on the other hand, climate refers to average conditions over long periods. It is important to note that climate is rarely uniform, even within a region, so environmental conditions can vary over small distances, creating microclimates. The main force that shapes our climate is solar energy that arrives as sunlight and strikes Earth's surface. Some of that energy is reflected back into space and some is absorbed and converted into heat. Some of that heat in turn radiates back into space and some is trapped in the biosphere. There are three main gases found in the atmosphere, which are carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor. These are called greenhouse gases and function like glass in a greenhouse, allowing visible light to enter but trapping heat. This phenomenon is called the greenhouse effect. Near the equator, solar energy is intense as the sun is almost directly overhead at noon all year. The curvature of Earth causes the same amount of solar energy to spread out over a much larger area near the poles than near the equator. Thus, Earth's polar areas annually receive less intense solar energy and therefore heat from the sun. This difference in heat distribution creates three different climate zones: tropical, temperate, and polar. The unequal distribution of heat across the globe creates wind and ocean currents, which transport heat and moisture. Every species has its own range of tolerance, that is, the ability to survive and reproduce under a range of environmental circumstances. A species' tolerance for environmental conditions helps determine its address or habitat, that is, the general place where an organism lives. And each is the range of physical and biological conditions in which a species lives and the way the species obtains what it needs to survive and reproduce. If you look at any community, you will probably find more than one kind of organism attempting to use the same essential resources. When organisms attempt to use the same limited ecological resource in the same place at the same time, competition occurs. Competition can occur both among members of the same species, known as intra-specific competition, and between members of different species, known as interspecific competition. The competitive exclusion principle states that no two species can occupy exactly the same niche in exactly the same habitat at exactly the same time. If two species attempt to occupy the same niche, one species will be better at competing for limited resources and will eventually exclude the other species. An interaction in which one animal, which is the predator, captures and feeds on another animal, which is the prey, is called predation. An interaction in which one animal, the herbivore, feeds on producers such as plants is called herbivory. Sometimes changes in the population of a single species, often called a keystone species, can cause dramatic changes in the structure of a community. Any relationship in which two species live closely together is called symbiosis, which means living together. Biologists recognize three main classes of symbiotic relationships in nature, which are mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. A relationship between species in which both benefit is known as mutualism. A relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed is commensalism. A relationship in which one organism lives inside or on another organism and harms it is known as parasitism. Biomes are described in terms of abiotic factors like climate and soil type, and biotic factors like plants and animal life. Major biomes include tropical rainforest, tropical dry forest, tropical grassland, desert, temperate grassland, temperate woodland and shrubland, temperate forest, northwestern coniferous forest, taiga, and tundra. Mountain ranges and polar ice caps are not easy to define in terms of a typical community of plants and animals, so they are not usually classified into biomes. Aquatic organisms are affected primarily by the water's depth, temperature, flow, and amount of dissolved nutrients. Water depth strongly influences aquatic life because sunlight penetrates only a relatively short distance through water. Many aquatic organisms live on or in rocks and sediments on the bottom of lakes, streams, and oceans. These organisms are called benthos. Freshwater ecosystems can be divided into three main categories: rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, and freshwater wetlands. A wetland is an ecosystem in which water either covers the soil or is present at or near the surface for at least part of the year. Plankton is a general term that includes both phytoplankton and zooplankton. Why are estuaries so important? An estuary is a special kind of wetland formed where a river meets the sea. Estuaries contain a mixture of fresh water and salt water and are affected by the rise and fall of ocean tides. Many are shallow, which means that enough sunlight reaches the benthos to power photosynthesis. So, how do ecologists usually classify marine ecosystems? Ecologists typically divide the ocean into zones based on depth and distance from shore. They divide it into intertidal zone, in which organisms are submerged in seawater at high tide and exposed to earth and sunlight at low tide. They also divide it into coastal ocean, and it extends from the low tide mark to the outer edge of the continental shelf, and in open ocean, which begins at the edge of the continental shelf and extends outward. The open ocean can be divided in photic zone and aphotic zone. The open ocean typically has low nutrient levels and supports only the smallest species of phytoplankton. So that's it for chapter 4. Thank you for your attention.